Okay, Pop. This Sunday you've invited the family to gather at church for the dedication of their new softball field.
Yes.
Tell me what this is about.
The quick answer is that it's a gift to the church in memory of our son Ken, and it's a ministry of the church to the community.
But I
And
know there's some history here.
yeah,
that goes
oh
with that.
boy, is there history. If you want the whole answer, I got to go back, coincidentally, 50 years ago this year.
Oh boy.
That's when the whole thing started. When we lived in Indian Hills, we had a friend who was actually Midge went to school with him, Don Engstrom. Did you go to school with Don? I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, his son was.
Yeah, and they were neighbors of ours and very good friends. And he got involved in a thing called Sweden House, and where that came from is a wealthy Christian gentleman on the Christian radio up in Duluth, created a restaurant which he called the Sweden House Borgesborg, and it was very successful. So he conceived of an idea of using this concept for people to earn an income while they were doing their ministry, because not all ministries are pastors. There's all sorts of things going on. And so he went to the Billy Graham organization, and that's back in the olden days when they were headquarters down in Minneapolis. And what was that? Can't remember the name of the street. And he went to see a guy by the name of George Wilson, who was running the Billy Graham organization. And so they decided to create a franchise of these restaurants to provide a way for people to earn an income while they're conducting their ministry. And so that's what Don was working with the Sweden House at that time. And so when I was asking him about it, and he expressed some interest in it, curiosity more than anything else, he invited me to go down to the Billy Graham organization and to see if I was interested in a net franchise and if they were interested in having me as a franchisee. And so I talked to Mr. Wilson, and the concept was that these would be Christian people involved in it. There'd be no secular money or secular influence. He didn't want to get any cross-fertilization in there, so I went down and was interviewed by Wilson and gave my testimony, and I passed the test as a born-again Christian, and so they needed a franchise in St. Cloud. And so one thing led to another, and we began a Sweden House in St. Cloud. And when that happened, the whole thing, in my mind, was dedicated to God. It was a ministry. And so it was a very successful thing for a couple of years, and we had a lot of ministry performed there. They are taking place. The Gideons met there regularly. That was actually the birthplace of the YMCA. I was on the founding board, and so our founding members got together there at the Sweden House and put together the YMCA. And also during that time, I was on the founding board for Youth for Christ, and we got that thing going. And then when I was in Minneapolis, I belonged to an organization called the Christian Businessmen Association, CBMC, Business Committee. And so I got that started in St. Cloud. So that was going real good, and we had a lot of things, a lot of churches, people were using the facility because I didn't make a room charge. So they could come in there as a group or whatever, and whatever their purpose was. But unfortunately, the restaurant itself began to unravel because, frankly, in hindsight, 50 years of hindsight, it just didn't have the professionalism of the people involved. Either the owner-operators or the Sweden House people themselves were not what you'd call professional food service people. And so slowly we began to lose money, and it got to a point where I wasn't making any money. And so I couldn't pay my franchise fee. And so another good friend of mine, Jerry Potter, was running the organization at that time. And so he asked me down to the office, and we talked about what my problems were and the financial problems. He says, well, what can we do to help you? And I says, just waive the franchise fee. Well, they couldn't do that. And so there wasn't a choice. I had to do something because it was at an end. And so I decided I would separate myself from the Sweden House. And that was not very healthy for the organization because there was a number of restaurants that were not doing all that well. And so they was very concerned that it'd be a domino effect. If I dropped out, then anybody who wanted to could just drop out without any contractual problem or what have you. So they sued me for breaking the contract. And I got called in for a deposition with a half a dozen Sweden House guys, and their attorney happened to live in the same apartment we did, and they were very good friends of ours, George Masters, and he was very professional in the deposition and all that. But it went back and forth what to do and problems and corrections and where to go from here. And finally, George kind of thought he had me by the short here because he was looking at my articles of incorporation, and there was no president listed. I think I was vice president, and Midge was secretary of treasury or something like that. So what they thought was happening is that I had a silent partner who wasn't a Christian that was bringing money into or financing the organization. And so George looked at me and, Ken, I notice you don't have a president listed here. Who is the president? I was silent. I said, God. Well, that kind of rocked the conversation for a while. And so they were trying to figure out what to do about the thing, and it happens that my attorney at that time in St. Cloud, Bob Pattison, was also a friend of theirs, and he was hunting with the Spurgeon twins, who I had gone to scout camp with, was very good friends of the Spurgeons, and they were out hunting in a duck blind, and they turned to Bob and says, what are our chances of winning this lawsuit? He said, not a prayer. So that separated it. It was still a dedicated to God. That was the whole purpose of the darn thing. But we went through this 30 years or whatever it was, as at least a ground round with no income from it. But finally, that went into the ground. The ground round went into the ground. I don't know what that means. But they asked, so they pulled out, which left me hanging dry, and tried to rent it. We had a couple of very unfortunate instances of people trying to rent it without money, and it finally got to a point where I had to sell the building. And so finally, 50 years later, or whatever it be, 48 years later, whatever, we sold the building, and again, just a reminder that was still dedicated to God. When I sold it, Midge and I had discussed it there, that the first thing we had to do was return a portion to the Lord for providing for us. And so we did that. We made a good gift to the church. And then we were trying to figure out how to make a memorial out of that. And we went through things like a memorial garden, again, keeping in mind that or Kenny, but dedicated to God. And so we were thinking about things like a memorial garden, and then other things we could do to the building, but they're all kind of a sterile and hands-off sort of thing. And it wasn't my idea. It came from one of their board members of a ballpark, because they just moved out there to Sartell. I guess that's actually still Sauk Rapids, whatever. And they had a lot of land, so they conceived the idea of using the gift to make a ball field. And so that's exactly what happened, is they made a ball field, and which is a beautiful ministry, because they're no question, a service to the community. There's no other ballpark in the area, and the kids were coming over and playing, and their dads were coming over to play, and so that was the intention, to bring them into the influence and orbit of the church. And so the idea of this Sunday is a dedication of the field to God and in memory of Ken. But I can't, I think that pretty well covers it. Of why it's there to begin with is I never considered it mine. I was a steward, and God was the, what, owner? He was the president. Wow, if I can remember back that far. Born in Minneapolis, raised in Interlochen Park, had 3 brothers and a sister, and the foundation, the rock of our family, was my mother, Blanche, and Chief was Foursquare, and it was very interesting because they really related. I didn't know until years later what a strong foundation they had laid, and we see it today in our life at the farm, the life at the Grand Lake. The family is very close, and it all goes back to those 2 wonderful people.
And we all still like each other, which I think is
Yeah, isn't that nice?
Truly.
We don't have any
Enjoy being
fights.
together.
Yeah, so, but that's what started with a very strong mom and dad with a firm foundation, regular churchgoers, and so that raised in Interlochen Park, and went to Harley Hopkins Elementary School, then to West High School, and in the service for a couple of years. Served in
About what year was that?
44, something like that, when I went in the service and was there for a couple of years, and then
You could do a little aside from when you came back from the service about your story with Mr. Erdahl when you guys landed. And
that
I
was
love
it.
that story.
Yeah, that's an interesting. It just so happened when we were returning from, we were there at a VE day, and so we came home not too long after that. I don't remember, a few months. But just happened on the troop ship was a friend I was raised with, was, you know him, Jack Erdahl. And there were some other friends on the boat too, but so that was just a great thing to have come home with my childhood buddy, so to speak. Knew him through Gyro. The whole families were very close to each other. But the interesting thing is when we got into New York, we landed in where, Newark, I think, is that where they land? Something like that. And so, but we had a couple days there. So Waldorf Astoria, we've been hearing about that in Minnesota for a long, long time. So let's go stick our nose in there. Well, I couldn't believe it, because by that time there was a few million returned veterans. So we went there, and we were in our kind of dirty, rugged GIs. We'd been on the boat for whatever it was in those days, 10 days, and probably didn't smell too good.
I was going to say, you're probably pretty right.
And we just, I don't know who he was, the manager or somebody. He's the number 1 guy around there. But he took us in hand, and incredibly, they took us up to a room. We took off our uniforms, had them cleaned and pressed, and he fed us. And of all the millions of GIs that had come through that darn hotel, but because we were veterans of the war, they treated us as grandly as though they were a king and a queen. I couldn't believe it. It was very wonderful. So that was my little interlude in New York. And then we came back, and I went back to college, University of Minnesota, and it was around about that time, let's see, I was getting into my young 20s and looking at pretty girls a lot. But I saw this one girl I broke up with, and then the guy that my sister married, John, said, "Hey, I got a gal for you to meet." And I said, "Well, you're going to set up a blind date." Midge worked at the Northwestern Bank in those days, in the what department was that? What department were you in at the bank?
Trust.
Trust department. And so we set it up. John would meet us there and introduce us. And so we got there, and I got there, and no John. I'm looking around, so I just looked around and saw the prettiest girl in the building and said, "Are you Midge?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "I'm Ken. Let's go have coffee." Well, that led to a delightful marriage and 5 kids of our own. So that's where we got married. Then I worked, graduated, worked at Ford Motor Company. And I just went to work for them. I remember that in October. And well, for years, I was a skier. I used to downhill and alpine skiing stuff. Anyhow, I just got to work for Ford Motor Company. And so we were getting married. We went for there October. And back in those days, you had to be there a year to get a vacation. So the only way I could figure out to go back skiing was to get married. So Midge and I were married in February and went out to Aspen for our honeymoon. We got on flew out there. When we left Minneapolis, it was 20 below, and we had on our storm coats in those days, and she still had her orchid in her dress or coat. And we got into Denver, and it was 70 above, 90 degrees warmer.
In February.
Well, yeah. So we had just a little bit of surplus clothes with us. So I told Mom just to check everything. We were going to catch the train, the Prospector, which left Denver over to Salt Lake City. And so we just checked everything, our right down to our overnight bags and our suitcases and everything. And then, because we had 2 hours to kill there, so we walked around Denver for a couple hours, nothing eventful. Got out of the train and pulled into, not Colorado Springs,
Glenwood Springs.
what?
Glenwood Springs.
Glenwood Springs, yeah. And got off the train and looking around for the baggage car was right behind us with our skis and luggage and everything in it. And the train started to move, and I'm thumping on the side of the train. Hey, our stuff is in here, getting kind of panicky. That didn't bother them, they just pulled out. They used the term, it was a sealed boxcar and went straight through to Salt Lake City. So I took my bride across the street to the Glenwood Springs Hotel, and our second night of married life, and she didn't even have a toothbrush. She cried. I told her someday we'd look back at this and laugh. And she's not laughing yet, but she's thinking about it. So we were in Aspen for a couple of days before I was able to retrieve all our belongings when it came on a return trip out of Salt Lake City. Met some delightful people from LA there, and bless their hearts, they let me use their car to run back and forth to Glenwood Springs, met every train trying to get our stuff. But so we had an eventful honeymoon. And we even had our luggage for half of it. And the kids grew up primarily in Di and Kenny and Tom. I think we're in St. Louis Park, weren't they? Virginia Circle North.
Yep, 8401.
And then we moved to Indian Hills, beautiful place in Edina. And there had the other 2 kids. I don't even remember which way Kate was born. And it was at Indian Hills, and in 1963, I was working at Univac at the time, and my good friend Frank Seidel and I used to take lunch breaks. We were over in the 7th Street building and walk down to the river where the Univac, that was the, Univac plant was, and we'd eat our lunch and walk along the river. Very delightful. And one day Frank turned to me and said, "Ken, are you a Christian?" I looked at him and asked kind of a weird question. Isn't this a Christian country? I've gone to church all my life. Isn't everybody a Christian? He says, no, that's not what I meant. And he said, and he had just accepted Christ about 2 weeks earlier from a physicist that went to CBMC, a big, tall, stately man. And so he led Frank to the Lord, And through Frank, I made a commitment to Jesus, went out in the backyard and prayed the prayer of repentance, and nothing happened. And being an engineer, I thought I had the formula wrong, so a week later I went back out in the yard, got on my knees, make sure nobody was watching. This is a pretty ridiculous thing. And again, committed my life to the Lord. And nothing, not even a mosquito bite. Got up, walked back towards the house, and the hair on the back of my neck just stood up, literally, because I thought, my gosh, I've quite literally, as though I signed a contract in blood with a French Foreign Legion, committed my life to a complete stranger. I had no idea who Jesus was. Well, Frank was in about the same boat, so we were very fortunate. We had, at UNIVAC in the time, and in between projects, the expression is you're on the bench waiting for the next project to come along. So we had a whole summer there where we'd bring our Bibles and our books and all this stuff and study. And of course, whenever were requested to do any work for the company, we did. That was obviously they were paying our salary. That was the priority. But we had a lot of, shall we say, a lot of free time to study. And so that actually is what led to our meeting with the Ingstroms, and which led to the Sweden House, which led to Discovery Church, which led to a ballpark. So there's a...
And again, here we are this weekend.
Yeah, here we are again this weekend.
And this past winter, you celebrated what anniversary?
Well, we've been happily married for 10 years.
And you celebrated which anniversary?
Oh, the 65th anniversary.
65, that's pretty impressive. I am so proud of you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 of them were good.
You gotta start someplace, right?
Yeah, we have a delightful family, as you can tell, with Diana sitting right here helping us, and Kate. Unfortunately, Kenny, the reason for the memorial to Kenny is that while we were on vacation in the Cayman Islands, Kenny died.
Almost exactly 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. It was 5 years ago, April. We're still trying to get over that because Kenny was a big, strong, healthy guy, an athlete, a tremendous skier, an instructor and a racer, and well known nationally in the ski community. And also, he was getting in shape for the Grandma's Marathon. They lived up at Proctor at the time. They had just moved up there a couple years earlier to a new job. He had a fine new job there, and so he was running about 5 miles a day. And he got up on a Friday morning and told Linda, his wife, that he didn't feel too good, but he decided to go to work anyhow. And at noon he felt a little better, so he thought he'd go to the Y and work out. So he went to the Y and was changing clothes and died. So it was interesting. In the next room in his house, he was all packed to go up to British Columbia to hunt grizzly bear with a bow and arrow. That's the kind of guy he was.
It was a very special permit that he had through work. His boss was sending him.
Yeah. The trip alone cost $10,000 to go up there.
And just to look at all that stuff he'd picked up to take was
It left the company in the lurch. It certainly left his family in the lurch. The boys missed him terribly, as did Linda. And there's still a big hole in our hearts for him. Which brings us pretty well up to date, I think. Yeah, Midge, let's get her in the act.
Yeah. Okay, Mom. I think it would be great if you could just tell us a little bit about the 5 kids you had.
Well, if anyone would have told me that isn't any better, that I would have 5 children, I would have said, never. There is no way in the world I could have 5 children. But all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but when I became pregnant, I was excited, and never thought about the other four. So it was great. When Diana arrived, her father was just ridiculous. He just carried her all over the nursery floor and said, "Isn't she cute?" And showed her to everyone. And he was so proud. So that was a ride. I said, "Kenny, not everybody cares." And he said, "Oh, yeah." So then we had Diana. Wow. She was always a good little girl. She was always a nice person. And I don't ever remember of just trying to rip her apart because she was bad. She was just a nice person and treated people nice. Everybody loved her. In fact, I worried about having other children because I thought they'll never treat them the same. And am I supposed to just ramble
Just
on?
keep going. So a couple years
Yep.
later, what happened?
Yep. Just go down the kids one
Yep.
at a time.
Okay.
Yep.
So I thought, well, this is nice. And then we didn't talk about how many children to have too much, but guess what? 2 years later, Kenny appeared. And
So was that a surprise?
no, and I thought it was great that we had both a girl and a boy. We could probably stop then. But I think your father always had in mind more children.
You both came from big families, right?
Right, we
How
both
many
came
kids were
from
in
big
your
families,
family?
but that was probably why I didn't need as many as
Oh,
he
okay.
did. What?
And how about when Kenny was little, there was something that happened at church that you enjoyed
Oh,
thinking about? It was really
he
sweet.
was fun to take to church. He was a peppy little boy, and he'd hold my hand, and I'd go take him to class. And one day, when we were walking to class, the minister came by with us, and he had his robe on, which they wore during this service. And as he walked past, Kenny said, "What? Hi, Jesus," or what was it?
Are you Jesus?
"Oh, are you Jesus?" He said, "Are you Jesus?" And the man looked at him and smiled, and I thought that was great.
How old do you think Kenny was? Was that like 5 or so? I don't have any idea.
3.
3? That sounds
Yeah,
like Kenny.
probably 3 or 4.
Okay.
Yeah, because he thought it was Jesus.
I think that's sweet. So a couple years after Kenny, then what happened? Number 3,
Who's 3?
the middlest most Tom.
Did we talk about you?
Yep.
Okay.
Now we're on to Tom.
You can delete some of this, can't you?
Oh, yeah, it'll all be edited, don't worry.
It's all edited.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the middle child, Tom.
Tom.
Where were you living when you had Tom?
Is it 8104 or 8401 or
Are we
something?
still in-
Virginia Circle.
Okay.
Be right on the borderline there, yeah.
Yeah, I think just before we moved to Edina, so we were
Right.
still in St. Louis Park.
Yeah. So I had Tim, and gosh, I should have thought about this stuff.
That's okay. What do you remember most about Tom when he was little?
Tom was just a nice little boy. Every time we went someplace or saw people, I would say, "Isn't he nice?" Because he was always good and he was always happy. He never caused any problems. Later he changed, but
But in the beginning.
but
he was
in
a
the
sweet
beginning,
kid.
he was just the sweetest little boy.
And then not too long after that, I think, what was it, about 14,
months?
no, I think it was less than that. It was about 14, 15 months later, you had your next event.
Yeah, and I thought I'd had enough. And I always said, you know, I wanted a boy and a girl. Well, if I had my boy and a girl, why did I need more? But guess what? That was Tom that appeared.
Well, that was Tom, and then the
And then-
next one was the blonde bomb,
Yeah, Kate.
Katie.
Oh, I tell you, it was so embarrassing when Kate was born. Kenny just held her. He thought she was the cutest thing he'd ever seen. And he took her, everybody that came to look at their babies, he would show me, he'd say, isn't she cute? And I said, cut it out. And he said, no, she is.
And she was blonde. That was
Yeah,
the
and
look.
he thought she was just something special. And
So then we have the afterthought.
yeah, way after.
Oh, but before we get to that, Kate was unusual as far as activities went because she was the only one in our family that had a horse.
Right.
Tell us about Oregano.
Oh, since I can remember Kate growing up, she always wanted a horse. Every time we'd see a picture in a book of a horse, she'd say, I want a horse, I want a horse. That's my horse. So finally, Daddy, you took her, didn't you? Daddy took her out to look at some horses. And she saw Oregano and wanted him. And boy, was she excited. And she said, I'll take care of him. I'll do everything. What?
And then
Gymnastics and skiing.
there, yeah, we'll get to that. Then, so after Katie, who was the afterthought?
Tim.
Yes.
It was
Still is.
really
And he still
Tim.
is.
Boy, was he an afterthought. You know, I remember when I was pregnant, I said, I can't take care of 5 kids. There's no way in the world I can raise 5 children.
We went skiing.
And so where did we go that winter while you were pregnant, before you had Tim?
Oh, we went skiing.
We sure did.
We went out to
Red Lodge, I think.
Red Lodge, Montana. And we went skiing, and it was wonderful, and everybody said, and I was skiing like crazy, and our niece, Susan Dean, was there, my niece, and she said, I told her I was pregnant, she said, oh, you could fall, you could lose it, and I said, maybe.
Way to go, Mom.
So-
But instead, we had a wonderful last event in your
Yeah.
long line of children. So tell us about Tim.
Tim,
You did let him live.
Yeah, he's still very present.
and
He was
Tim,
a little bit more of a handful than the rest, I think.
he could do anything. He could get on top of anything. When he was in the house and he'd get upset, he'd go hide. He always was hiding. And I'd have to look all over the whole darn house because he had such good places. And one time when he was hiding, I walked right past and I looked. And I didn't find him for ages. And I said, Tim, where are you? And I'm here. And all of a sudden I walked in, looked up, he was on top of the refrigerator. It was about a space this big, and he was crammed in there.
How on earth did he ever get up there? Amazing.
And-
Was that when we lived in Indian Hills?
Right.
Okay, that would make sense.
And
Wasn't he the one that, nature boy?
Out at the lake. Yeah, we went on summer camping trips. Tell us about our summer
oh,
camping trips
yeah.
every year.
Well, we like to go away and we like to do things. And so we were out at Grand Lake and we thought, wouldn't it be fun to come out here and camp for a week or two? And so Don said, fine, you know. It was Daddy who thought of it. And so we packed up and went out to Grand Lake, and it was wonderful. We just had a marvelous time. And it was a great idea of yours, Daddy.
Do you recall him running around at Indian Hills in his diaper in the snow?
What?
Running around at Indian Hills in his diapers in the snow?
Oh, yeah,
Going
and
up the top of the
barefoot.
hill?
Well, we called him, Tim liked to be naked. He loved being naked. So he would always take off all the clothes he could. And one day, he was dressed, and I was in the bedroom or the bathroom for something, doing something, didn't pay any attention. And he took off his clothes. And this was in Indian Hills. We lived on a high driveway. And he went down the driveway. And here, I look out the window, and this naked little kid is running down the street.
Remember that? We ran up, he was up on the top of the hill, and our neighbors couldn't get him because of Gretchen.
Yeah. And then,
Oh, yeah.
and then our dog was, we found out, was very protective because Tim was up at the top of this hill
His
with
diaper in the snow.
his diaper in the snow. And he was just having a great time running around, free as can be.
And
So
nobody
I
could
go up
catch
there
him.
to rescue him. And I'm just, I couldn't believe that he was, running around naked.
And he carried on the same thing at the lake every summer. That's why we
Oh,
called him
yeah.
Nature Boy. You couldn't keep clothes on him for anything.
Yeah, I guess he was just born naked and wanted to stay that way.
How about the different sports your kids were involved in?
Let's see. Diana, were you in a sport?
Well, we all loved skiing.
Oh, yeah.
We had family ski trips
Yeah.
every year.
The whole family went skiing every winter. And that was because of Dad. And
Yeah.
we're so happy that he brought that to the family, because it was a time when we, even though some were better than the others, we all skied together. And it was great.
And when we were in school, everybody except me decided to follow Dad's path and got involved in racing.
Racing. And Ken was the big racer in our family. At first, Kate was. When she was only 8 or 10, she was
She
winning.
went to the junior JC and
She was winning all the races, but it didn't last forever. And Ken was a very strong skier. He won a lot of races. And he was the one that really liked skiing.
Yeah, that became his passion.
Yeah.
Both Tom and Tim were racing for a period of time too, weren't they?
Yeah, and just the local races in St. Cloud and around. We had Ken was instrumental in forming a racing club in St. Cloud, or we never would have had it out at Powder Ridge. And so he got people together.
Yeah, and having a family of 7 all in ski gear was a rather expensive venture, so how did you
yeah.
remedy that situation?
And people would say to me, "Oh, your kids look wonderful. How do you do that?" But Daddy decided we should open a ski store. And so we went out to Las Vegas and went to the ski show out there and bought clothes and skis and everything. We didn't really know what we were doing. But it was the only one in St. Cloud, and it really worked out well for a while.
And it was called the North Star,
North Star
Ski
Ski
Shop.
Shop.
Yeah,
And how long did we have that?
About 6 years.
About 6 years.
but actually it got its beginnings in the Bavarian Buffet in the restaurant. You downsized the restaurant, and as part of the building you put the Bavarian Buffet. But what was the other business that you then
I had a gift shop.
And what was that called?
Midge's Boutique.
That's the one. How did you get
And-
started with that?
Well, I always liked things. I always liked looking at cute things and everything. And so we were in the restaurant, and at the front of the restaurant, before you came to the door, there was a space that was not part of the dining room. It was just a space that went out by the door. So I don't know, Daddy, was it you or me or who thought, I liked things so much, I always was looking at things,
And you had good taste, too.
that I should have a gift shop.
It was all your idea.
Oh. So it was all my idea. And boy, did I work. I tell you, wanting something and having it is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
You have to go to shows. It was really fun when I started out because I thought, oh, this will be nothing, We'd go to shows and Diana was always with me. And then we'd put the merchandise out and, oh boy, sometimes you'd sell everything and you think, why didn't I order twice as much? And other times people, just sort of looked at it. But it was quite successful for a while.
And then things changed and the ski shop and the boutique moved over to the Elks Building.
Yeah, the old
The Elks.
The old Elks Building
The
in St.
Elks
Cloud.
Club. Oh, I forgot
Very
my
good.
boutique was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's take a little leap ahead, because at a certain point in time, you got a whole new career that no one anticipated. And how did you get your start in your political
Fundraising. Well, Dave Dernberger, who I didn't know,
Dave who?
was running for
Senate.
Senate. And I don't know, I had friends who were doing things politically.
Yeah, that party out at Jim Miller's.
Yeah, we were out at Jim Miller's house. And everybody thought, well, I mean, and people I would talk to, they'd think I was a pretty good talker and could persuade anybody.
Cree and Boswich and Dave were traveling raising money.
Oh, see, you remember more.
And as I recall,
Quee, Boswich, and Dernberger, that was a good threesome. They were all there. And then, I don't know, I got talking to Dave and other people, and
wasn't it his birthday? Is that?
I guess it was his birthday, and we decided that, and I decided that I would collect money for a birthday present for him because he needed money. So I just started and went up to people at the fundraiser asking them for money for Dave. And what did I get, 10,000?
About 5,000, 7,000.
And so he was just floored. So then after that, he called me. He said, why don't you be my fundraiser? Why don't you raise funds for me? And I thought, I don't know. But I decided, well, I'll try. And that was the beginning of my fundraising career, which was really something.
Lasted quite a while, too.
Yeah, I had many trips to Washington that were fantastic, to inaugurals, to a lot of places that I never would have gone to or been able to get to.
And then I think was somewhere along the line you met Bob Cummins, which helped advance you to a whole different level of fundraising with the Freedom Club, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, Bob wanted to start this club. We were talking, and Bob Cummins was a friend of mine, and he has loads of money. And so we were talking, and he had said how he always wanted to form a club with businessmen to do political things. And so, I don't know, at lunch one day, we were just good friends. I said, well, that shouldn't be too hard. And he said, good, do it. So I started out and I called friends that I knew would join and asked them. First we had a luncheon, and then at the luncheon we told them that, you know, we wanted to start this fundraising. And it was amazing how they came around and really put in a lot of money.
And so how long did you work with the Freedom Club? For quite a while, I think.
Was it 15 years?
That's about right.
And you were their executive director. I mean, you ran
Right.
the show.
Right, yeah. Well, ever since I started there, then as we grew, I still was the head of everything. And until I quit. So it was a great opportunity. It was a lot of work. But I guess the reason it happened was because I wasn't afraid of people. I wasn't afraid to ask them for things. You know, a lot of
yeah.
people cannot ask
Not
for
many
money.
people have the courage to go up to someone
Right.
and say, I'd really like a check from you for
$10,000.
No, $25,000. 10 was easy for you. You went for the big dollars. And I always admired that because that's not a talent I have.
Oh yeah,
or-
well, I didn't think I could do it either, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was fun. It got to be sort of a game, you know. Let's see how much can I get from him.
So you were great.
It was wonderful. So that led to another 15 years. But it was a great opportunity, and I took advantage of it.
So it's been a pretty full life you two have had.
Yeah, you know, you don't think about it as you're going through it.
Ever talk about Kitty?
Oh, yes.
This one.
Tell us a little bit about Dad
And how you met him and stuff like that.
how you met him. We got Dad's version of how you met.
Oh,
but,
my.
Yeah. You think of, if you can tell us a little bit about how you and Dad met.
Well, John Hagerman was a friend was seeing Marilyn, his sister at that time, and he was a big blowout. And he,
What does that mean?
a big, you know, everything was big to John.
Okay.
So he came up to me one day. I was working at the bank, and he said, I've got somebody you got to meet, Midge. And I said, who? And he said, oh, Ken Dean. And he said, he's a nice guy. You know, you got to meet him. Yeah, okay.
Did you know him from work or did you go to high school
Yeah.
together?
No, I knew him from when I went with Danny, a friend of his.
Oh, okay.
And Denny and Franny. Franny was Denny's sister, and she was a good friend of mine. And then I went with Danny, and then ended up with John. But John was funny. He just,
So what was one of the first dates you ever went on with Dad?
with Dad, first date. Oh, I was supposed to go to lunch with him.
No.
No?
Well, that's when we met.
That was when you met, but your
Oh,
actual date,
I decided you should go.
First date, I don't know why I ever went on another one, because he said,
yes?
he said, let's go skiing. And I thought, I can do that. You know, I didn't own a thing, you know. I said, but I don't have any equipment. Well, we'll find it, you know. So thinking, it doesn't sound too tough. So we go, and I get all dressed and up at the top of this hill looking down, you know, and I thought, ooh. And he said, well, should we go, you know, shove off, you know. I died. And I didn't know how to turn or anything.
So how'd you get to the bottom of the hill?
Well, I don't know, how'd I get there?
Carefully.
Very carefully.
So
that was
I
your
would just
introduction
take a little bit of the hill at a time and stop. Then I'd take a little more. And then I said, how could you do this to me? Because I didn't like to have to do something I wasn't good at.
So how long did you guys go out before Dad asked you to marry him?
I didn't know if I wanted to or not.
Oh, yeah?
I was still in school, so that I would say maybe a couple of years, year and a half before I asked her to marry me.
Uh-huh.
But, yeah. I wasn't as sure as he was. And I never, I never told him this,
What?
but I thought, well, he's nice. I like him a lot, you know. But if it doesn't work out, maybe I can get out of it later.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
She's still working the angles.
I was just going to say, 65 years later, it must have worked okay, huh?
Yeah, but not many people would admit that. But I was really, you know, sort of, I had qualms about it,
You
you
were
know.
unsure.
What if this doesn't work out?
Well, you were young and your mom wasn't living any longer, so she wasn't there to give you
No.
guidance. And
Nobody was there to give me guidance. I was on my
so
own.
you had to figure it out by yourself.
But
That's a scary proposition.
Turn it pretty.
And I seem to recall some photographs in the past where you were quite a looker when
Wow.
in your younger days, and weren't you on a float in the Aquatennial Parade?
Oh, my goodness. Yes, I was. I represented the Minneapolis Banks.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they chose me to ride on their float, and it was really neat.
I
So-
never found out that Grandpa liked you.
Oh, when Grandpa picked me up. And so Kenny, he would work in this parking lot next to Grandpa's business at night sometimes when they were having things. And then he got to keep the money. So, I mean, he could make $50 or something. And we weren't actually living too high on the hog. So,
After
Oh.
the parade was over and you
No.
were on the
Grandpa
float.
was kind of excited.
Yeah. So Grandpa came to pick you up.
Grandpa,
Harry.
Grandpa Perry is the most distinguished man I've ever known. And everything's so proper and everything, you know.
Never displayed emotion.
No, never. And I remember sitting there saying, well, Ken can't pick me up because he's working at the parking lot, you know. And nobody said anything, and Grandpa said, I will. I almost died. I was always scared of Grandpa.
I think we all were.
So then when he came, he was really nice, but I couldn't believe that he wanted to pick me up.
That's really sweet. So he liked you.
Yeah. So, but I think about things I've done in my life, and I haven't had too bad a life. I didn't have a mother. I didn't have, people to really guide me and things, but I'm so thankful that I have my family. They are fantastic, every one of them.
Today.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 more. Kate was so cute.
One last question if you like, or if you feel like we're done, we're done. Your call.
Have anything else you want to share,
Yes.
Mom? You do. Okay.
I just want to say how thankful I am for my family, every single one of them. They are beautiful children. I can't imagine how I got so lucky raising them. We must have done something right, Ken, because they are wonderful children, and we are proud to have them.
Thanks, Mom.
Amen. Good girl.
Yay. Well, that was great. And you didn't even know you were going to do this.
No.
You were on for 30 minutes.
Oh, come on.
Oh yeah, and it was really beautiful. I'm so
Really?
Oh, it was beautiful.
Oh, I can't believe it. 30